Okay, good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And welcome to another week of Introduction to Urban and Regional Planning. This week, we're going to have a group presentation on regional planning, followed by a brief discussion before I try to and theorize and finish our session. I believe since most of us are here, I believe the presenting group are already here. I'm going to disable the waiting room. Okay, can the presenting group please indicate to me that you are ready to present? Okay, well, before you start, may I remind you to mark your attendance before we move on. Please scan the QR code you see on screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now to give the opportunity to the presenting group. Okay, right. Now I ask you again, are the members of the presenting group all here, are all present and ready to present?
We're still waiting for the other participant because Indira is not getting to the room yet. Sorry.
Indira is here. I see on the participant list.
Oh, yeah, but she's just got into. But yeah, we're ready then.
Okay, great. Well, I have allowed participants to share their screen, so you may do so whenever you're ready. And to group one, the time and screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, good morning everyone, and Mr. Nanda. I am Indira and I am accompanied by my two teammates and friends, which is Karina and Rayhan, and we are from Group 1. Today we will be presenting under the topic of regional planning with its concept and issues. This presentation will be brought out by Karin first. Karin, you may take the floor.
Okay, thank you, Indira. First, we have to know what is regional planning first. So, what is regional planning? Regional planning may be defined as the integrated management of the economic, social, and physical resources of a spatially bounded area. And regional plans and policies have been proposed and carried out since the beginnings of civilized settlement. Next. And why is regional planning important? First, to minimize the regional disparities. There are wide regional disparities in the levels of resource utilization as well as in the levels of development. Second, to resolve the critical problems, broadly speaking, the way the environment conditions are being degraded and are posing a serious threat to the human welfare. Third, to address the problems of rapidly increasing population, particularly during the last 3 until 4 decades, has increased the pressure on world resources tremendously. And fourth, to to ensure the integrated development of functional regions. The regional boundaries of many functional regions do not conform with administrative boundaries. And the last one, to recognize the futuristic regional realities. Rapid development in the field of information and communication technology all over the world resulted in first, revolution in the field of transportation and communication. Second, broken the rural isolation has increased the interaction between rural-urban communities. And third, increase the volume of traffic and trades. Fourth, increase the population mobility, both interregional and intra-regional. And the last one, finally, given rise to new regional boundaries with intensified integration. Next, please. And when was regional planning first found? The concept of regional planning was first introduced by Patrick Geddes, who began to develop his broader philosophy of regional planning in his 1915 seminal book, Cities in Evolution: An Introduction to Town Planning Movement and the Study of Civics. And for the next slide, there will be Rere to begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karin. And the next is difference of urban planning and regional planning. City planning focuses on the land use plans, spatial growth, and policies which are at local level, affecting that particular city or town, whereas in case of regional planning, the emphasis on the policies is more. Those policies become the guideline for the urban areas, and their existing plans are modified accordingly. This helps in meeting the larger requirement of the whole region. Regional planning is an urban planning strategy that focuses on the social, economic, environmental development of a specific area. Regional plans address the needs of the entire region rather than just one municipality. And then the next is, there are three types of regional planning. The first one is interregional planning. Interregional planning is part of regional planning along with sectoral and global planning. All three are irrelated field of national planning. And then the second one is interlocal planning. There is an important difference in skill between interregional and interlocal planning. Interregional planning is activities at national, while the interlocal at the regional level. This type of planning needs to be developed within the institutional framework of regional administration or government. Interlocal planning agencies formulate different planning objectives for a given areal unit based on different models and methods depending upon the socioeconomic and political structure of the region. And the third one is locational planning. Interregional and interlocal planning activities are considered as explicit spatial dimensions of the planning system. However, these planning activities are very weak without the cooperation and support of sectoral agencies, institutions, and enterprise which promote the development in sectoral perspectives. The locational planning, the implicit dimension of the planning system, is very often more important than explicit dimensions. And then the next one is the concept of regional planning. The first one is building the resource economy. The second one is strengthen the economic opportunities. The third one is diversifying the national economy. The fourth one is providing strength and balance in the economic development of the nation. The fifth one is environmental improvement and protection. And the last one, general welfare of the people. And the issues within regional planning is the first one, traffic congestion due to the expansion of commutable area. The second one is role due to activities. The third one is mobilization of domestic potential and resource. The fourth one is participation of the wider community in the development process and effort to fulfill the minimum standard of living of many people. And the fifth one is participatory planning to build social capacity and community institution needed. And the next slide will be presented by Indira.
Thank you, Rehan. Now we are moving on to the matter of case study. The topic that our group has chose for the case study today is about social and economic disparities in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Now, mobilizing economic resources in Indonesia has been quite a challenge because the reality on the field shows that productive resources in Indonesia has been dominantly controlled by a higher group in society. Now, this control has led to inequality in terms of obtaining access to development resources, which result in the emergence of inequality in terms of welfare in between groups of society. Now, this is a very harmful and serious issue because if this keeps on being neglected, it could cause an effect on the stability of the country's economy. Next slide, please. Now, there are 4 factors or signs of social and economic disparities in Indonesia. 4 of these signs closely relate to one another. The first sign is income inequality. Firstly, what is income inequality? Income inequality is the uneven distribution of wage or income in between groups of society. Now, this shows that there is a widening gap in between groups. It has become no secret that the widening gap has become in income distribution has become a main concern for the government because this issue could lead to other problems such as low economic growth. It could also place people in unnecessary hierarchy. It could also lead to health and social problems to the lower class. Now, based on data here, World Bank has revealed that the Gini Index of Indonesia, which is an inequality measurement, has measured Indonesia's inequality up to 39 in 2017, which is a high number considered how fastly it has increased in the span of 27 years. Next slide, please. The second factor is unequal opportunities. Now, this factor is closely related to the first one because the opportunity that we chose to talk about here is the opportunity to gain access to education. Now, it is clear that education is the most significant contributor towards income inequality. A study held by De Silva and Sumarto in 2013 has revealed that 1/5 of income inequality is caused by different levels in education. Thus, this implies that the more equal access they have, it could increase human capital, which has better impact on equality through higher wages because those who are more educated can acquire more skills and influence the labor market even more. The data here shows that regions like Papua doesn't have universal access to primary school, which is a very fundamental education grade for children. It shows that 20% of households having to travel over 1 kilometer to the nearest village with primary school. Thus, this implies that children who are born and who grow up in similar regions like Papua, they start life with a huge disadvantage compared to areas with a better developed environment and with easier access to education. Next slide, please. The third factor is low resiliency. Now, what exactly is low resiliency? Low resiliency is the low ability of one to recover or to overcome from a shock. Now, resiliency is very important and essential because the welfare of a country depends on the ability of the economy to cope, to recover, and to reconstruct from a shock. Therefore, this helps to minimize the overall consumption loss of a country. Based on the data shown here, during a 5-year period, it has been estimated that Indonesia has suffered an annual loss of more than 20 billion due to disasters. Now, this has shown a really big number. Now, again, if resiliency remains at a low level, it could create an imbalance on the country's economy. Next, please. The fourth factor is high wealth concentration, which is closely similar to the first one, but this focuses more on how it creates a widening gap in between societies. High wealth concentration is the uneven economic distribution in between groups. So this shows how hierarchy massively affects the social and economic welfare of a society in a country. Now, based on the data here, it shows that the economic growth had mainly benefited the richest 20% and left behind the remaining 80% of the country's 250 million population, which is Indonesia. Now that shows a really big imbalance in a country, that 20% has benefited the country's economic growth. Again, this results in increasing division and a widening gap in between the middle class, and the wealthy investment class. Next slide, please. Now, how could regional planning offer solutions to this issue? Here we present the 4 solutions that could be offered by regional planning. The first is to create planning regulations that focuses on infrastructure to reduce the gap between the lower class and the higher class. And the second is to create inclusionary planning, which is similar to the first one, but it focuses more on creating affordable housing for lower income families. Therefore, they could live in a more sustainable and a more better environment. The third is to promote territorial development, which is to socialize and to help people understand that cities are not only seen as individual entities, but also as the connectivity that allows further and faster economic growth. And the fourth is to enhance urban and economic resilience that focuses to tackle climate change and disaster risk. For these solutions could help achieve three of the targets in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is 8, decent work and economic growth, 10, reduce inequalities, 11, sustainable cities and communities. That is all from us. We are Group 1. Thank you for listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I think that was very well presented. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies. So you have highlighted, you have presented a basic understanding or the basics of regional planning, and you have also presented to us a case study on the complexities. I think on the complexities of regional planning, namely equality or inequality, to be precise. It's interesting that you mentioned access to education. Yesterday, just the other day, I read an article on how genetics affect our influence how far we go further in school. I'll post a link. I'll post a link in our chat box so that you can access the article. Now, the article is indeed the article that I'm sharing with you has a eugenics flavor to it, in the sense that people born with the right conditions can go further in life, whereas if you tie it in with the case study that Group 1 have presented, it's not always the case. No matter how good the genes, no matter how good a set of genes you have, if you do not have proper access, if you do not have the opportunities, then that is all wasted. Right. Before we move on, I'd like to invite the other class members, the peers, to give a comment or or perhaps even ask a question to the presenting group. Anyone? Anyone? No. I have a tool that I don't really want to use. It's called the Wheel of Names. It has all your names on it. So 14 names. If I click the wheel and spin, it will stop at a random name, and I will ask that person to say a word or two, a comment or two maybe, or perhaps even ask a question to the group. I don't really want to have to use this tool, but anyways. Can I have... it stopped right on the group's name. Then again. Can I have a question, or is he here with us? Oh yes, he's right next to me on the screen. Mas Fakhreza Rizky, do you can you please say a word or two?
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Maybe I'd like to ask a question towards the group's presentation.
Sure.
First of all, Deep, I'd like to ask a question about the part of the issues that they gave concerning about low resiliency and high wealth concentration. Maybe I'd like to ask a solution, because if we see urban planning, we maybe some of us view it as a future or furthermore a solution towards society, but is there any solution that can currently impact from urban planning? I mean regional planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very very nicely put. Low resiliency and high concentration of wealth. What are your solutions to it? Group one.
I'd like to answer. Thank you, Reza, for the question. As mentioned before, regional planning could offer 4 solutions to those 4 issues. One of them, to tackle low resiliency and disaster risk, is to enhance urban resilience to tackle these issues, because by enhancing urban and regional resilience, we could prepare ourselves for disaster risk, climate change. Therefore, we could minimize the loss of the average annual loss of an economy. That is one of the solutions that regional planning offers. Second is to also do inclusionary planning, which again provides an affordable housing for lower income families. Therefore, it could minimize the gap in between groups of society. That is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mas Reza, are you satisfied with the response?
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, can I have a question or a comment from Richard? Richard or Richard? Richard Emmanuel.
Maybe I haven't think of a question yet, sir.
Well, okay, or maybe you have a comment for the group. Do you agree? Do you agree with what they? Do you agree with what they presented, or perhaps you disagree with some of the points that they presented?
Yes, I think I agree with what they have presented because, sir, I'm sorry if I mixed Indonesia with English.
That is not a problem.
Yeah, because pemerataan pendidikan in Indonesia is still not belum dilakukan dengan baik. So that's why I think maybe from urban and regional planning can help to give the solution a better solution for especially maybe like the economics and the pendidikan in Indonesia. So.
Thank you very much. I agree with what Richard has said, that we still have unequal access to not only education but also to other basic services across the country. Let's say healthcare and all I can think of every time I think of basic services are education and healthcare. However, if you, however, I'm from Java and I live on this island, and it is arguably the most developed island in the country. However, we can still see disparities across. We can still see the disparities across Java itself. Seeing as it is so-called, it is said to be the most developed, the most developed island of all the other islands in the nation. We still have inadequate schools. We still have inadequate health facilities and so on. My friends who live on more remote places. My friend is a doctor. She practices in a very remote island, and she says that medication is hard to come by. There are no. They're struggling with nurses and other healthcare workers because nobody wants to work there. Well, nobody wants to work there because there's absolutely nothing there. It's just a couple of villages. No businesses, no entertainment, nothing. Virtually nothing. She said. I forgot the name of the place where she works in, but yeah, that's just an illustration. Right. Well, thank you very much for that, Richard. And I will highlight and re-emphasize on some of the points that all of you have mentioned during the discussion session. Can I have just one more question or comment from? Sorry. Okay, Mas Raditya Fauzan.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
Can you hear my voice?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. I don't think I have a question because the presentation is very well prepared and very well. It's very understandable. So I just have comment. So I agree with the contents of the presentation regarding regional planning, because I think it is very important for the Indonesian government, not just the Indonesian government, but all governments all over the world in developing countries to optimize their regional planning policies and regulations to develop their regions because in some remote areas and regions, there's still people with inadequate facilities, inadequate utilities. There's, as Prananda mentioned before, poor healthcare, poor education, and there's the lack of electricity, lack of water, water sources, and so on, so on. Um, so it so to because it has to be equal to everyone. Everyone must have the equal opportunities and um, equal treatment from the government. So to further develop the country more in its welfare, in its kemakmuran. Regional planning is very important and very crucial for the country's development and growth. Um, Cukup sekian Pak, thank you.
Very well said. Thank you very much. Okay. I think we can move on to the next session. I would like to once again thank I would like to thank Group One for your lovely presentation. Give yourselves a pat in the back, and we can give the group a virtual applause. And allow me to try and wrap up what or try and wrap up the points that that has been said throughout the presentation and throughout the discussion, and see if we can see if I can help the class to come to a more a deeper understanding. For those of you who may have joined in a little late, please mark your attendance. And here are some of the points that I'd like to mention, and building on what Indira, Karin, and I'm sorry, I forgot who was the other and Rehan, that's it, have said in their presentation. So what is a region? What is the purpose of regional planning? Those two have been mentioned, and I'll provide you with a little bit of context just so that you can get a grasp of the complexity or the difficulties that that our government and our society face in trying to bridge this inequality gap. And then the regional, I'll introduce a couple of regional planning processes, and then the issue of control and management. I think there were some points about power and control that was mentioned in the discussion earlier, and then some issues with regional planning. So there are different understandings of what a region might be. A region can be as large as a continent or as small as a city and its immediate surroundings. In our language, the word region can be translated into wilayah. That's why we have regional planning, perencanaan wilayah. And then we also have region as kawasan. Although kawasan can also be loosely translated into area. So if you say urban area, kawasan perkotaan. But sometimes when you use the word kawasan, it can also mean region. And I suddenly have forgotten the illustration that I had in mind. Anyway, so it can be, as I said, it can be as large as a continent. It can be small as a city. It can be an even smaller area, like an area in the countryside, and so on. So it really depends on an individual's understanding and what the textbook definition really is. We have to look at. We might need to look at. We may need to look at the foundation of the foundation of spatial planning law, number 26, 2007, to find the textbook meaning of region. The historical and spatial context is, but what I'm trying to say is that the historical and spatial context is completely determinant of what a region is seen to consist of. And so the concept of regional planning is actually pretty highly elastic. And I think because of this sort of elasticity and a degree of uncertainty as to what regional planning is, then that's where all the complexities begin. So the primary purpose of regional planning, you guys have mentioned it earlier, that it is deciding on the general distribution of new activities and developments to provide equal opportunities, to provide equal resources, or to distribute resources to the greater society. So this distribution of new activities is necessarily indicated on some map base, but the scale of regional planning and other considerations will indeed. I'm sorry. Hang on. Okay. Sorry about that slight pause. Homeschooling. Where was I? I said something about a map, but map scale. But the scale of regional planning and other related considerations will dictate the level of detail given in showing, for example, new settlement areas or areas of commercial and economic development. What I'm trying to say is that when you develop a regional plan, a regional plan's level of details is not as much as, say, as an urban spatial plan, or it is also very vastly different to, say, a detailed master plan of a area or a kawasan. So, and the time scale planned for a regional plan is also vastly different. Most of the times, the time scale for a regional plan is around 5 to 10 years. So if you were to plan the development of a region today, you would have to project and try to foresee trends 5 or 10 years in the future. I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm sorry again for the little interruption. Duration. Regional planning purposes may be set also in various ways, depending on institutional arrangements made in each country. And what I mean by institutional arrangements is the basic political values or the basic philosophy of a country, or a country's inclination or orientation. For example, if the central government is a socialist government, then a significant portion of the decisions will be made by the central government. It will be made centrally. In semi-federal states such as Germany or Spain, then it is less. It is less the case, especially in countries like ours. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry once again. Anyways, God, I'm so distracted. So this is the context of the context or the framework of our spatial planning activities. So we are, of course, far from a socialist nation. We are a democratic nation, and therefore the central government delegates some of its power and authority to representatives throughout the nation, all the way down to the local government. So, great. I've completely lost my train of thought. So when we talk about regional planning, when we talk about a regional scale of planning, then most of the time we will talk about a provincial scale. A provincial scale planning, and at this level, the level of detail is very far from, say, the detailed plans, of course, and so therefore the provincial plans usually serve as a normative guideline. It serves as a legal foundation for whatever other spatial plans there may be. So the provincial mission and vision, so misi dan visi, is usually described in the provincial plan, and then further detailed or further translated into more operational themes or more operational terms in the spatial plans below it. So there are two basic or there are two categories or two approaches in the regional planning process, you need to realize that there is no realistic prospect of a public corporate planning of a comprehensive rational form within regional planning, because of the powerful divergent pulls and pushes contained in economic, social, and political spheres. So regional one of the reasons why regional planning is quite complex and very challenging is because of this economic, social, and political pressures that are placed upon it. I mentioned here that there is supposed to be a rationality and an interpretive stages to regional planning, but in reality, in terms of rationality, planning and I write here, planning and rationality are inseparable, but oftentimes real planning does not always work rationally. If you remember last week, I gave a comparison between spatial planning and rocket science, and it's that sort of complexity where in spatial planning we deal with human behavior. Well, in regional planning, we deal with economic forces, market forces. We deal with greater political forces, of course, and the like. And so, in bridging disparity, I'm sure that our administration, that this government has the capacity to bridge those inequalities. They have the skills, they have the resources, but do they have the political will to do so? That is a question that we should all ponder, I suppose, and it will take us quite a long time to answer. Now, policies may be understood in different ways. As I mentioned, how the trickling down of guidelines and policies in our spatial planning framework. So policies may be understood in different ways, and they can accrue different meanings over time. Now, the main objective of a regional strategy may be clear to a planner, but to a planner who wrote, or a team of planners who wrote and compiled the plan or the strategy, but it could be interpreted differently by other actors, and there are possible legal different legal interpretations as well. And what I mean by this is, I'll tell you of the time that some of the staff in the department and I were asked to come up with a strategy for housing and settlement in Sumeneb, Madura. For those of you who don't know, Sumeneb is situated in the further east of the Madura, in the farther east side of Madura Island, north south. Yeah. And our job description was pretty straightforward, to come up with a housing and settlement strategy for the city, for the urban area. And once we've analyzed the situation, we've come up with solutions and recommendations, and we've documented these solutions and recommendations, and handed them over to the city government. And in the planning process, What happens after that is that the government would then translate our solutions into regulatory mechanisms, and that's when everything sort of got muddled, because our solutions, our recommendations had to be interpreted legally, and that means dealing with legal terms. That means dealing with the the legal culture. I'm sorry, another bit. Right. Legal interpretation. So, and what's strange is that the city government, they wanted, can we just finish this in can we just finish this regulation with one or maybe two very strong one or two very strong rules, and that was not the case. We ended up with a document that was at least 100 pages long, because it needed to detail and to anticipate how people will behave and so on. So that is an illustration of the complexity in just one aspect, housing and settlement. So if we were to take that case and then replicate it into other aspects of spatial planning, then you can kind of get a grasp or get an idea of how complex the situation can be. Now, in terms of control, regional planning or spatial planning, for that matter, is quite quite elitist, if that makes sense. In the sense that planning, the planning process is confined to a small number of technical and political actors. Not everyone participates in it, and so this sort of elitism is arguably desirable, inevitable, or maybe even both. So a region is normally taken to be a large super local entity, and within that region, the region contains perhaps several million people, and covering a very wide geographical area. Now, there are some social processes that may be occurring. There are maybe one, two, or maybe three social processes that generally occur within this geographical area. Two sorts of social processes may be used to comprehend this area. One being formed by electoral or similar democratic mechanisms. This is talking about the power structures. We elect representatives of the people, as a bridge to communicate with the government and to deliver our aspirations. So we do have electorates, we do have public representatives, and so on. And on the other side, we have the learned community, or people with technical expertise. So we have representatives, and then we have people with technical expertise, and then we have the greater society, who much less equipped to participate. Some of them even more or less disconnected with this whole planning process. They have no idea what's going on. They just see everything. They just see everything go by. So we have these sort of three categories of people within the whole planning environment, and so that in a way the processes are democratic processes, make it or make this planning process hold an elitist value of some sort up to a certain degree, because we do elect people and then we trust people with technical expertise to sort of come up with solutions to everyone's problems. But anyways, even if regional planning is the final responsibility of an elected regional government, planners may still want to make every effort to open up discussions on future spatial locations or future spatial options for the widest possible audience. If the deciding body is not elected, there may be stronger grounds for such efforts to give some degree of democratic legitimacy. If the representation via groups, as in the first model, is not seen as sufficient. Now, this opening up may be done by a variety of means, including opinion polling, publicity in different mass media, such as the press, television, internet, etc., and various public discussion forums. So, yes, the decision makers or the decision making processes is usually left to a certain group of people, the elitists. But regional planning does sort of relegate its control up to a certain degree, and make it more inclusionary, try to make it more participatory. I think inclusionary planning was mentioned, and one way to make your planning process more inclusive is to open up for public opinions. We do have public hearing periods where spatial plans are introduced to the public, and then that's where members of the public are invited to comment on the draft plans. Just a couple of years ago, early last year, late 2019, early 2020, we had this draft called the Omnibus Law draft, and that caused a great public stir. But that public stir is one way, or is a good indication that the government is trying to make their decision-making process more democratic and more inclusive. Although in the end, I think the final product didn't exactly fulfill everyone's expectations, but that is to be expected in the sense that we are a country of over 200 million people. You can't satisfy everyone's needs. So, a major issue, perhaps a central issue in a process as complex as regional planning exercise is, of course, coordination or integration, or maybe coordination and integration. But if you break it down, then there are only two general directions for coordination, which is vertical and the horizontal coordination. Vertical coordination between different planning authorities or agencies is indeed very, very critical, and it is something that our government struggles with a lot. But I think not only our government, but it is exhibited. It is exhibited in different countries the world over. Um, what is known as institutional arrogance is not exclusive to Indonesia, but it can also be found in other countries as well. How the regional planners relate to those in the central government will condition much of the content of the plan, given that in most countries, to an extent even in several federal states or other forms of government, overall planning system regulation and most major infrastructure funding is a prerogative right or prerogative authority of the central government. So again, this is where the political issues come. So no matter how good an infrastructure plan you have, no matter how good a regional plan you have, because the central government has the greatest control over the disbursement of funding, then if they say no, we can't give you any funding for this, then the plan is a no-go. This is where politics come into issue, and thus adding to the complexity of regional planning. Or if we come back to the case study of inequality, then this adds to the complexity of trying to solve inequality. So basically, vertical coordination should also logically include relationships with bodies or agencies below the regional level. Relationship with local authorities is arguably very important, but it takes very different character depending on the nature of the regional level. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance of I haven't really had the chance of seeing this vertical coordination in action. I've seen a lot of horizontal coordination. However, where at the regional and at the local level, different government bodies or different government agencies dealing with different technical aspects of the different technical aspects of the city or a region's development, seeing how they coordinate and how they provide input to one another is a very crucial step in managing regional planning, and not only regional planning, but managing regional growth and development and ensuring regional competitiveness. I don't know about other regions, but for East Java, I think we're doing a pretty good job at horizontal coordination. So perhaps the two major process questions in any regional planning context are: who exactly makes the key decisions? I mentioned no matter how good a plan you make, if the government says no if the central government says no to funding your plans, then your plan is a no-go. So who is it that really makes the key decisions here? And who should take these decisions to be, or for the process to be recognized as democratic and fair? Is it democratic and fair is it democratic and fair if we were tasked to come up with a solution to a problem, and then when we propose the solution to said problem, the central government says no? Is it democratic and fair when that happens? There are no easy answers, I suppose, to that question. But we should give them some thought. And why am I bringing the issues of power and democracy to regional planning? Well, it's because, as I mentioned, with regional planning, you are dealing with forces that are beyond most of the times beyond your capacity, economic or market forces, political forces, and other social pressures and such. So, however, planning theorists have been debating the question of power in planning for over 3 decades, I think. One essential line of disagreement has been what scope for choice is present in planning, particularly for those doing planning at a local or at a strategic level. Some scholars emphasize on the space for creativity and innovation because they see power structures or pressures as both enabling as much as they are constraining. So with regards to funding, the central government may be, or the central government or the government may be an enabling force in the sense that they have the funds, they have the means to make your solution into fruition, into reality. But their power, their position also can also make them a constraint to realizing or to materializing your plans or solution. So that's just an illustration of the different power structures or nested within regional planning or planning in general, I suppose. Another perspective on many of the same issues come from the question of how to make public policy making more democratic. Of course, democracy is not the objective of planning. The objective of planning, whether it's regional or urban, is greater overall wealth or economic efficiency or ecological sustainability. Those 3 values may be placed well above democracy, but all across the globe, across the world, I think many arguments about regional government and by extension regional planning have been phrased partly in democratic terms. So a consideration of the democraticness of current planning, including the regional dimension, can make a useful contribution to thinking about the regional planning process. I think the biggest question is the biggest question for you guys to ponder as you progress through your academic career and then transition to a professional career in planning, hopefully, fingers crossed, is how democratic is our planning processes really is. Oh, that doesn't make sense. How democratic is our planning process? Question mark. Ponder that throughout your term with us. So to wrap things up, when you think about regional planning processes, I think you need to do 2 things. One is to lay out ways of approaching process, which may spark ideas on how to analyze and to develop present techniques. The other task is a more practical one, which might suggest the best ways to organize regional planning to achieve relevant objectives and values. So for now, let's just summarize in 2 points. First, the decision of who to seek or to involve or who to exclude in the planning process is a highly politically charged one, and that affects control of decisions. Recent planning thinking has laid the foundations for a general sense of best practice which is for an open and a more participatory process. But practitioners are aware of the large barriers in making this really work. Now, really working would mean that in some way interests would have an equal chance to influence the regional plan and its implementation in a very unequally resourced institutional and socio-economic landscape. This is a very, very tall order. Moving to a genuinely open and participatory process would need many measures which have not yet been contemplated by most governments. One way for our government or for our planning system to move to a more democratic process is, as I demonstrated last week with the interactive, detailed spatial plans that people can access. It is still incomplete, however, but that is one way. Our government is trying to make this spatial planning process more open, more inclusive, and a lot more participatory, of course. It is not perfect, but it is a very, very, very good indication that we are thinking forward. Second, the regional planning process presents a formidable management challenge. You have to take on board the vertical and the horizontal pressures of a wide range of governmental agents and societal stakeholders, businesses, societies, and such. Management skills of the highest order is needed to make the process work. Now, on almost any definition of working, whether completing the process to the government's timetable, or maybe securing a sustainable plan for the long-term future of the region. If you had the time to check out our classroom, I've added a couple of folders in 2 different sections. I've decided to add more references to week 1. So why have I decided to establish or to create a folder in week 1? We're in week 3 now. Well, it's because the contents of the week 1 reference folders will complement the book that I gave you, Urban and Regional Planning, 5th edition. The book by Junaidi and book by Hall and Jones, both would tie in very well with Urban and Regional Planning, with the Urban and Regional Planning book. In the week 3 reference folder, specifically in the supplementary references section, you can have a read at Glasson and Marshall. If you want to find out a bit more on regional planning, you can keep the book, because I'm sure it will come in handy as you will have to take Regional Planning Studio, I think, in the next coming semesters. And then Stir and Taylor. This is an old one, but I'd like to say that it's an old but gold article. It's called Development from Above or Below, which argues or touches on how you should look at regional development and regional planning. Should you look at it from above and create this sort of map or diagram for regional development, or do you need, or is it best for us planners to actually look at it from below, observe what's going on in the field and such? Right. Before I end our session, you are more than welcome to, of course, comment or ask any questions if there are things that are if there are bits and pieces that are unclear. Otherwise, if you may not have a question for me at the moment, you're more than welcome to deliver your question in the group. We don't have to. We have a WhatsApp group, and that we can use that as a discussion forum, as an open discussion forum, as a place to share resources as well. Okay, great. Thank you again to thank you again for the wonderful presentation done by Group 1. I look forward to the presentation. I look forward to Group 2's presentation, and I think Group 1 has set the standard quite high. And thank you everyone for joining me this lovely, cool morning in Surabaya, although virtually. Look forward to seeing you everyone next week. So have a great day, everyone, and stay safe, stay well, take care. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.